Hello again, YouTube. I apologize about my voice in advance because I've got a bit of a cold, so it's slightly deeper again. So, sorry. um, After making my last video, which was titled "Being Out," which was all about being a trans person out in various, ways in public and at work and all sorts, I apologize that video ran on so long. It was quite long. Sorry again. But I wanted to touch on something very similar to it. Not long after making that video, I attended a transgender support meeting here in Fort Worth. I'm going to leave a link to their site below. It's fantastic, they're lovely people. And the topic we touched on during this meeting was called thick skin, and it was all about taking criticism. And in my last video I spoke about the fact that as a trans person, we do take a bit of criticism, we do take a bit of discrimination, insults, etc. But I didn't really say about how to deal with that, because everyone has a different way of dealing with it. But this meeting I went to touched on some perfect examples of how to deal with them, and it was fantastic. I'm just going to share them now with you. So the first things first is, whenever you receive criticism, to separate the fact from the fiction. And what I mean, that can also apply to both opinion next to fact as well. As a trans person, you get told all sorts of things. You're ugly, you're disgusting, you're this, you're that. Oh, you must be a sexual deviant because you're trans, or you must be a sex worker. I've actually heard that quite a few times, unfortunately, to my face. Now, the first thing you have to do is separate the fact from the fiction, or the opinions that it may well be. Anyone can tell you that, things about being trans, and anyone can tell you that you're a sexual deviant, you're transgender, it must be, but you know that you're not. And that's the first thing you have to do when taking any criticism, is assessing the criticism and saying, is that actually true? And if someone says something like your looks or your voice, in my case certainly, or anything, just like, is that just their opinion? And it's really important, because if it is, it doesn't really apply to you as much. It's not a fact. It's not something that's really about you. The second point we touched on was about finding the red button. Yeah, a bit of an innuendo there, but I'm not going to touch on that. It's all about the one thing that gets you. And we all have it, whether you're trans or not, whoever you are in the world. We all have one thing that if it's criticised, then we flip out. Whether that's we get, it bursts into tears, we get really angry, or we spend the rest of the day feeling bad about ourselves. There's always that one thing. For me, it has always been my looks, because I am incredibly vain. So for me, being told that I'm ugly, I don't care if anyone says I look like a man or not, but if I'm simply told I'm ugly, that hits me harder than anything I can be told. Anything. I realise I open myself up for some nasty comments from YouTube, but screw it. So it's all about knowing the one thing that gets to you, and understanding that will always get to you regardless. We all have one, and you may know, you may not. The third thing is to reframe criticism. Now, there is a big difference between simply being insulted by someone and getting criticism. When I first started out, going out in female form with an awful wig, a really, really awful wig, I did get a bit of criticism. I did get odd looks, all sorts, and I allowed that to hit me. I allowed it to take that in, and whenever anyone said to me, oh, you're just a guy in a dress, or something like that, I've used it to empower myself. Now, what I really mean by that is I've used it as part of my motivations for practicing makeup skills, or practicing my skills with my hair, or... Okay, definitely not the voice. I get that. But, when someone does criticise you, you can turn it around and use it to empower yourself, or use it as a suggestion. Now, not all criticism is like that. More often than not, it's just insulting for the purpose of harm. But in terms of when someone says to you, well, I know you're trans, but you've still got really, guyish hair, or, something like that. Something where it's a bit of criticism that might hit you a little bit. But at the same time, you can use that and you can learn from it too. And there's nothing wrong from learning from criticism either. The fourth one is probably the most important one possible. And it can't apply to all criticism, but it applies to the vast blinking lot of it. And that is to ignore people on the sidelines. 9 times out of 10, the criticism we receive is more often, it's more often than not, it's from people that don't know us. People that pass us on the street, or in the mall, or maybe even people that work with us who don't know us that well, who criticise us. They don't know what we've been through. They don't know what you've been through. They don't know what you go through emotionally every day as a trans person, or gay person, hey, even cisgendered, or whatever your issue is. They don't know what you're going through in life, where you've come from, the things that you've done in the past, and things you've got past. And the important thing to remember is, because they don't know you at all, it doesn't matter. And I know that's so easy to say and so much harder to internalize and put to practice, but when someone says, something nasty to me, they don't know me. They don't know my history, they don't know who I am, so I'm not going to let them get to me. It's something that takes a lot of practice, and it's very difficult to do, but once you start to do that, the majority of criticism you refuse, you can brush off. Just later. Again, yes, I do realise that a lot of people whose issues revolve around their family or family members, or even school teachers, administrations, bosses, whatever, yes, it's a little harder to ignore them. It's very, very difficult when it's parents or guardians, or any family member really, who's been with you all the time, and then suddenly, they're not on your side when you truly need them. But it can be very difficult to deal with that way. Which does bring me on to my last point, so I'm not going to bore you for much longer, which is finding a thick-skin role model. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's trans, it doesn't have to be anyone famous in particular, or anything. It can be absolutely anyone. If you have a role model who has gone through difficulties in their life and has still come out strong, learn from them and be inspired by them. For me personally, my thick-skinned role model is Keanu Reeves. If you look at his life's history, the things he's been through, he is a man who has been through some great difficulties and hardships. It's to the point where it has brought tears to my eye just reading about him. And yet he has some fantastic performances as an actor, despite everything he's been through. And so for me, he is my role model. Whenever I'm feeling that I couldn't take criticism, or I'm finding difficulties with people, I do think, this is nothing like what he's been through, yet he came out strong. I can be like that too. And it can, like I said, it can be absolutely anyone. If you have a particular family member who's been through a lot, and they've come out, for the better, even if it's nothing to do with being trans or gay or anything like that, a good, strong role model to focus on, and it can make a huge difference. But that's that. I just wanted to touch on that because there were some very interesting points from the transgender support meeting I went to, Fort Worth. Again, I'll be leaving their link below. And as always, I'll be leaving my email in the comments or description or whatever below, so that if you are someone facing a lot of difficulties, whether you be trans, gay, lesbian, bisexual, non-binary, queer, etc, 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 or you're just straight cisgendered and you're having difficulties in life and you need a sympathetic ear to talk to, contact me. I'm always here. and I'm always willing to give people support as best as I can. Anyway, thank you for listening, guys. Subscribe, comment, like, whatever. As long as you watched to this point, I'm happy with you. So, cheers.